And we are live. Hi, I'm Bob Boross, and this is my Jazz and Tap Dance Life. This is my YouTube video channel talking about issues in jazz and tap dancing, instruction and choreography, history, the whole range of things. Just a few notes about the channel itself. I've been doing this for just about a year. There's just great support. I mean, every week there's more and more subscribers, so I'm happy for that. Thank you. Last week I did an interview and we were at 2,100, and now we're at 2,150 in just 7 days later. So that's just an amazing support. So if you do like what you're seeing, if you do like the things that are on the channel, please subscribe, hit that notifications bell, and click the like, because once you do that, it tells YouTube that other people will like this and it will just spread the word a little bit more. What we're doing right now, today, we have a live interview, and I'm doing a series called Preserving the Jazz Dance Heritage. And what I'm trying to do is get out ideas of people who are working deeply rooted in the classic ideas of jazz dance and trying to either keep that alive or using that to infuse their work as they move into a more contemporary way of expressing things. And I've been talking to a lot of people who have been in jazz for quite a while. But today we're kind of switching gears, and I'm going to somebody who's a younger choreographer who's making his name in New York. His name is Spencer Pond, and his company is called the American Jazz Company. So I'm going to bring Spencer into the broadcast right now. There he is. Hi,
Hello,
Spencer.
everyone.
Welcome.
Hi, Bob. Hello, everyone that's tuning in. Thanks for coming to watch this chat.
Sure. Yeah. And thanks for agreeing to this. And that's a good point. Let me just bring that up first. I mean, this is something that people who are watching can always ask questions. You can put in comments. So, you know, you can check in and just say where you're from. So make sure that if you're watching that you just, you know, give us some feedback, and you have a question for Spencer, put that in there, and we'll try to get it answered. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Spencer. So you are based in New York City.
New York, the Big Apple, as they say. Yeah, New York City.
And you are performing and choreographing in jazz dance.
Yes. I exclusively, I will say, choreograph and perform in jazz dance, and I tend to specialize in dances that are from the jazz age. I do a little bit of like musical theater kind of style stuff, and you know, all that kind of that whole range of dance, as they say.
All right. So, I mean, jazz, as many people would think, is something from, you know, quite a while ago, from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, when I first had it start. Why are you choosing jazz, jazz music, jazz dance as where you want to situate your expression?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what I love most about jazz changes all the time. Right now, because I'm doing a lot in the Lindy Hop community, which if you're in New York, you should definitely check it out. It's a very warm, loving, welcoming community. The thing that I love most about it is like kind of that heartbeat, that community aspect, the social aspect of it, and the energy that comes along with that. So I grew up doing different renditions of jazz, a bunch of different renditions. I was very blessed to have a teacher or two that also was inspired and learned from a lot of the great masters over time. But right now, I'm really get to focus in on the energy that I know from being all the way back in high school and dancing to big bands. And now I get to dance socially to big bands, and that energy is back, which is really what drives me to keep myself in the jazz dance world.
So your first experience is coming from a social dance aspect and from listening to the music of that classic jazz period. Not somebody who's saying, no, I grew up on the street dance of the 80s or something like that. So you're going way back, but finding that as something is touching you, something is reaching you within that music.
I grew up with like very, very diverse musical household, in the sense that, you know, my dad used to listen to the Beach Boys, my mom loved ABBA. There's kind of that generation. But I went to a high school in Connecticut that had a really incredible big band, and they're actually known around the country for their big band. So every year we used to do a concert that I would dance in, and that's how I met my mentor. Actually, she was the choreographer. But so every year it was just like I I got spoiled by being able to dance to big band and big band music. And it was like a big spectacle for a high school because we didn't do musicals, but we did this show. And so right off the bat, like right when my jazz training started, I was like dancing to live music. I was dancing to like an incredible big band. So I feel kind of spoiled in that sense where right off the bat, it was like live music, big band, really like informed my jazz dancing because you got to like instantly feel like the syncopation. You got to feel the groundedness, the energy, the kind of like collectiveness, which was amazing.
Right. So there's a feeling you're getting from the music that was inside of you, and that's your personal response to the music at that age of what you were experiencing. But now you are doing more concert work in jazz. So how did you make this shift? Like what made you want to go from dancing socially to saying, no, I want to create something and bring a piece out to a public, try to inform them of some particular aspect you have in your mind?
Yeah, I think what it started off as is that I felt this like urge inside me to choreograph, and the easiest way for me to do it was to just do it, which I know sounds like very simplistic, but it was easier than being like, well, maybe I want to be a musical theater choreographer. Let me try to get someone to allow me to choreograph a musical or any of those things. So I was like, okay, well, I have talented friends. Let's just do it. You know, they don't want money. They don't need money. Right now, for me at least, you know, we're all young. We're all just hip and having it. So yeah, I was kind of like, let me just create a piece, see what happens, and present it however I can. And kind of the concert stage was the first time that I was able to do that. In Hartford, where I'm from too, I was kind of always able to dance in concert jazz companies, which sounds crazy. But like I said, my high school had one, and it wasn't like a dance team. It was very much like a concert jazz company kind of. And then I was in this concert jazz company called Stop Time Dance Theater back in Hartford as well. So it just kind of, I was always doing things for the concert stage while I was in musical theater. So that when I wanted to create something, I was like, okay, concert dance, concert stage. And I'm not committed solely to concert dance in a jazz form because I don't want to feel limited by where or the concept of the concert stage. But yeah, it's such a great opportunity to kind of like prove yourself, create something, get a video of it, show people that you can do it, and then let the opportunities kind of flow from there.
Right, right. Well, I agree with what you said before. You know, when you're younger and you have a group of friends and everybody's willing to work for free, basically, that's what gets the ball rolling. And you can do that when, you know, you're in that younger age. When people get older, they have more obligations, they have more directions in their lives. And that's when people say, look, either I got it paid or I need to do something to further, you know, what my life is, that sort of thing. So you're in the right area for people just to jump together and make something. So is there any like company or choreographer that you saw that gave you inspiration, that made you make this switch from social dancing to concert dance? Is there somebody out there that just spoke to you?
Yeah, well, I feel like my journey has actually been reversed. So I think social dancing is more new to me, but the thing that my social dancing only started about like less than a year ago, where I was actually going out. But my concert dance history is also new because I was more in like the musical theater world while I was in the concert dance. But when I moved to New York City, the first person I kind of danced for was Sue Samuels. And I remember who we know very well. I saw her piece, Papa Was a Rolling Stone. And I believe it was at the JCE Luigi tribute. I could be wrong, but it was at the 92nd Street Y, I think they did it. And I just remember her having like 12 women. And it was like, I loved the like funky aspect of it. I loved that so much when I saw it. So when I moved to New York City, I instantly found her. I was like, I'm gonna go take her class. I was ready. So I worked with her right off the bat, and I saw her and I heard her passion for concert jazz dance because she obviously is very big on concert jazz dance, she loves.
Right.
Yeah, so that's kind of was like, yeah. So I was like, oh, concert jazz dance is a thing. Let's do it.
And so now, you have further inspiration that not only are you going to be a choreographer, not only going to create pieces, you're going to have a company. You're going to have an actual entity that I imagine is the vessel for your creativity. Although I was reading on one of the other things that I had about you that said you were looking to stage some classic work. So maybe you could talk a little bit about too. But what made you, bite off that, incredible task of saying, I'm going to have a dance company and I'm going to make it work?
Well, first off, I'm absolutely insane. I never want to make money,
Right.
and I want to be stressed out all the time. So I thought, what better than to create a company? No, in all seriousness, I think what it started off with, I used to have a different company under a different name, and I was doing a bunch of things. I was trying to like kind of find my voice. And then I kind of was like, okay, no, I'm a jazz dancer. I want to do this. Like, let's do jazz. This is what it is. This is what is in my soul. I'm going to do jazz. And then I kind of was thinking about how to do that. And for me, the American Jazz Company is a long-term goal. Where I don't have any expectations for it now necessarily. I don't have any pressures for it. I have goals that I would like to achieve, but they don't need to happen now. So for example, I would love to stage classical works for sure. Like there's an element of it that once I have a company of dancers, I would love to be able to be like, okay, no, we have the mathematics style in our bodies, and we have this piece that he did, and then it's just kind of like in the repertory. So eventually, I would love for it to become a repertory company. The American Jazz Company is named that because I wanted to set a lofty goal. I felt that every other kind of dance style has like these big names and big institutions. Like even tap dance now is getting up there where, you got some big contenders that are getting grants and working at the Joyce, and they're doing these things. And that's kind of like, what if I eventually have this company, which I mean, I do, but what if I eventually have a company that could be more of a repertory company where it's not just my voice in jazz dance, but it's everyone's voice in jazz dance, where there's an institution, it's big. Like in my head, I picture it to be like another New York City Ballet, another ABT, another New York Philharmonic, whatever, it's these big institutions is like the end goal.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why is it the American Jazz Company and not the American Jazz Dance Company?
We talked about this, me and a bunch of my core collaborators, when we were picking a name. I think, to be honest, and this is maybe not the best answer, as I think we decided Jazz Dance Company sounds worse than Jazz Company. But then
worse in what way? What do you mean by worse?
Just like the flow off the tongue. I think we liked the American Jazz Company. It was like shorter. I think that was like the biggest factor. But then we were getting into it, and we also thought that like without the music, jazz dancing doesn't exist. So by keeping it a little bit more open, the American Jazz Company, there's potential in the future to have musical elements to it. Like it would be kind of a cool goal in the end too, is if we have our own like house big band that is creating music that is jazz, that is designed for dancers and not for just listening. They're here, they're with us, they're creating music that is dance friendly, and also we get to push them as dancers and they would get to push us as musicians. So by not putting the dance on there, I think that in the long term will also keep us open to possibilities.
Okay. Well, I mean, I understand. I've done a lot of teaching in universities, and jazz, because it's dance, is put in with the same department with modern dancers and ballet, even though we're very different in where we're coming from and what our expression is. And yet, if you go over to the music department, there's usually a jazz aspect within the music department, and they are much different than the classical musicians. And I always wondered, why don't you take the jazz dancers and take the jazz musicians and put them together in the department of jazz, and that would probably be the best idea. So maybe that's something that you're mentioning too.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think especially, I think that'd be great. Actually, I feel like I was just listening. Was it you having a conversation with Dolly that you were talking about that?
Maybe.
Okay. I was like,
I talk about it a lot because I think
You're
it,
passionate about it. So man,
it's just where it needs to be, you know, in terms of people being able to be themselves without somebody intruding on it, and
yeah,
in some way. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop this up just a little bit bigger.
yeah,
So I want to ask you something about this. Now, this is the description. This is taken from the Jazz Dance Direct website, which is run by
yeah.
Melanie George. And
Who's there?
it says here, rooted in theatrical dance, modern dance, and vernacular jazz traditions, our mission is to create, preserve, and cultivate dances and ideas that represent the heartbeat of jazz. So I like that phrase, the
Hmm.
heartbeat of jazz. So can you talk a little bit about what is the heartbeat of jazz? How do you define that?
Yeah. So many ways to define it. What's the best way? I think the easiest way is it's just like it's that feeling that we all know. Like I'm as jazz dancers, we know that feeling. It's that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not, if I tried to explain it in a way that was a little bit less dancey, I would say it's got the community aspect of it. The heartbeat of jazz is that very grounded, historical feeling to it. So I think if we look back to the original jazz dancers, and you can start as early as like the kind of vaudevillian circuit where they had the eccentric dancers, and you go all the way up until the Savoy Ballroom, and you kind of watch these people dancing, and that
Mm-hmm.
is where that's the heartbeat of jazz to me. There's these people, and there's that music that's pumping, and you can just feel the heartbeat of that swung rhythm of that early jazz music, and you
Mm-hmm.
can feel how joyful they are. You can feel how grounded they are. Uh, yeah, that to me is the heartbeat of jazz. It's all about that
Mm-hmm.
like grounded, joyous, like syncopated, pulsing,
Mm-hmm. So
and
you're
fun.
coming from a definitely from a feeling aspect,
A
as,
feeling, yeah.
as what the rhythm is making you feel inside, and that's kind of where it gives you your impetus to go on with
Yeah.
whatever direction you may be.
Yeah.
We do have some viewers. If you're a viewer, you know, please check in. You can tell us where you're from. If you have a question for Spencer,
Yeah.
please put it out there in the comments, and we'll try to get it answered. Right now, I want to go to, you've given me some links to some of your choreography. So
Yes, yes, yes.
why don't you talk about this piece just a little bit, and I'll get it started.
Okay, so this is Good Judy's. What I love about this piece is it's kind of my not most recent because we'll probably see a video clip of rehearsal later, but it's my most or it's the latest piece that I presented where you can kind of see my social dance starting to seep in there. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of it is very, very me in the sense that like I've had this kind of old school style jazz and like theatricality to it, which is if you go back to the mission statement, we're still very theatrically based because I
Mm-hmm.
come from a theater background, but you can sort of see how we're playing with a little bit of the gender roles there. There's a very
Mm-hmm.
like modern take on partnering, while also there's a very traditional take on partnering, as you can see here too. But this is kind of me starting to infuse more and more the social dance, the Lindy Hop aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and mixing it with that more theatrical style. So it was a blast to kind of like do it, and I try to use every piece that I do as of now as a chance to learn something. That's like a big thing because I feel like I'm at an age where I really really want to keep learning, and so every piece that I do is pushes me in some way to learn something. So that for me was like I'm pushing myself to know more and more about the
Mm-hmm.
Lindy Hop and how to kind of make this melange or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the fancy word would be. This
Mm-hmm.
mix.
Okay. All right. So that was a good one to start with. And now we're moving on to pas de drag.
Yeah,
And it has a lot of the same, you know, more vernacular types of steps in it, but
yeah.
you're definitely going in a different direction with this. So why don't you talk a little bit about this piece?
Yeah, this one is like my heart. This one's my like bread and butter. I love this one. It was actually the first piece that I created that was I'm going to use the word successful very loosely,
And this was
but
the first one that I saw you do. I was in the audience for this performance, and that's what I did, because I knew you from class, but I saw this and just instantly remembered your name as somebody who's got a future.
yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. It's very much comedy based, and
Mhm.
when I first created it, I was doing a lot of classical ballet. I was like intensively
Mhm.
training in ballet at the time. But coming from like a very like jazz is still my heart. And I was just doing it because people told me it would make me better. And I agree. It
Mhm.
definitely like, cleaned me up in a lot of ways. But I always loved the grand pas at the end of a ballet. And so I
Mhm.
was like, well, what if that was jazz? And I was like, what if that was me? So this version that we present actually doesn't have the two variations in the middle. It only has the what we'd call the pa and the coda.
Mhm.
But originally, there's a male variation for my friend, who obviously is a woman dressed as a man.
Mhm.
That's very like Eddie Cantor. It has an eccentric dance kind of vibe to it. It's very like yuck, 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 yuck.
Mhm.
And then I had a variation that was a striptease that was very like burlesque side of like the vaudeville kind of jazz era. And then it came together. And then at one point, I don't remember what performance it was for, but we had to shorten it. So I was like, okay, well, let's create this like shortened version. It just happens to be the one that works best. And we perform this piece a lot, and it's so fun. I mean, I get to
Mhm.
dance with my best friend. It really represents everything we're about. It's funny. The audience really, really loves it. They, if you like listen to the live performances, the audience is always going like, oh, and they're like laughing. So
Mhm.
it's really fun to like watch these videos. And yeah, and it also kind of has that very like modern take, so it's vintage
Mhm.
dancing but modern values, and
Right.
has the whole drag element and the playing with gender, which I love, love, love to do. um I have this like beautiful, gorgeous, custom made flapper dress from one of my friends. um yeah, it's this is just one of my favorite pieces I've ever done. It's
Mhm.
never going to go away. I'm always going to love it. It's the only piece that I think is like perfect in a sense. Like all
Mhm.
the other pieces, I'm like, oh, I see this, I can make this better. But this I just love. It's fun.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So, I mean, do you have any particular deeper idea about the switching of gender roles that you're trying to bring out? And I'm wondering, in terms of audience, I know you're saying the audience responds, well, but I'm just wondering, like, how does the audience see this? Maybe because it's not what they're expecting to see.
Yeah. The audience really takes it, really just sinks into it quickly. I've never had, I don't know, they don't seem shocked by it because
Hmm.
it's funny instantaneously. I think if I
Okay.
was doing the gender thing not as a more of a joke, a funny thing, I think maybe then that would become a discussion.
Hmm.
But I do, the deeper comment on it is that one of the reasons I started the company too, or started choreographing, is because I always felt more feminine when dancing. And so I loved doing all like the musical theater, kind of like
Hmm.
Charleston. And this is pre any of my social dance training. So this is just all stuff I've learned
Right.
from musical theater. But I never saw myself as, the Gene Kelly. I was always Reese. And
Hmm.
so for me, I got a chance to kind of like explore the more feminine side. Like I didn't necessarily want to be leading. I wanted to be following. I wanted to be lifted. And now I'm at a place where I enjoy both more. But I think that what is growing over time is that don't have gender expectations in dance.
Hmm.
Just let people prove themselves and let people um, shine in the best way that is possible for them.
Hmm.
And then let that spark creativity.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Now, this is yet another side of your creativity.
Oh yeah.
Why don't you talk about this piece and I'll get it going?
Okay, yeah, this is clavier work. So, I love this piece because it's super referential and it's intentionally so. Every piece that I do a lot of research for. Like I consume a lot of media and I
Mm-hmm.
listen to a lot of music. So this piece is completely done to Chopin music, which
Mm-hmm.
is not traditional for jazz dancing, but that was the intention. I wanted to scientifically look at jazz dance, and I was like, well, I know that music makes the dance, especially for jazz, like
Mm-hmm.
just because that's how jazz dance was created originally, was alongside music. So I was like, what if I remove the biggest factor? How can it still be jazz? And you can very clearly see in this video, like I was hugely influenced by Bob Fosse. Like I read all his biographies. I
Mm-hmm.
I burned through that Fosse DVD quickly. And so, I mean, this just looks like something out of Mine Hair, but then has a little bit of like my 80s obsession aesthetic with a high cut leotards, which actually I think more 90s because there's a thong in the back. But so since it's a thong leotard, but yeah, so I love incorporating different time periods, mixing together to create interesting things, and that's what I find most of my work ends up being is referential and pieced together to
Mm-hmm.
create something new and interesting. So this is very Mine Hair. Originally, we were looking to do it to live piano, but finding someone that doesn't cost $10,000 that can play all
Sure.
of Chopin's etudes
Mm-hmm.
was kind of lofty of a goal that I learned a little bit too late in the process.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, I believe Jan LaSalle, I'm going to say her husband, that might be presumptuous, actually can play all of Chopin's etudes. So when I
Mm-hmm.
saw her the last time and I met him, he was like, if you do this again, I'll play for you. So hopefully
Very
we'll do
good.
it again to live Chopin. But yeah, and you can see like the Liza Minnelli pose at the end of it. There's a lot of like the mathematic
Mm-hmm.
arms in there that you can
Mm-hmm.
see. The chairs from Mine Hair. It's very like what happens if we take away the music jazz and
Mm-hmm.
we just do the steps. So like what is like the physical embodiment? What is that
Mm-hmm.
physical heartbeat, that physical history of jazz?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, what's up for the future? Like, do you have something you're working on right now? Do you have a
Yeah.
different direction, or like what's brewing in your mind right now?
So what's bringing my mind? I currently we're working on we just started maybe like 2 weeks ago, um, creating a new piece it's a beautiful piece of music. It's by Mir Bisduchesne. I think that's probably the most American way you can say it, but it's a very like standard beautiful piece of music, and it's done by the Eyal Vilner Big Band, and they're very hot and popular in the swing scene right now. So
Mm-hmm.
what I'm trying to do is move the company in a direction where we can continue doing the very like musical theater style, because obviously the theatrical leanings of jazz that I come from, we're able to do very cool, impressive things that not necessarily a vernacular jazz dancer can do, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they take very specific training. In the future for the company, I would love to start every rehearsal off with a jazz class and a vernacular jazz class, just so that everyone has the same exact training and could do both skillfully. But as it is right now, it's harder to find people that can swing out, can do vernacular jazz, and can like pirouette 4 times,
Mm-hmm.
um, with like, and like there's beautiful ways that vernacular jazz dancers turn, but it's not necessarily, with that high passe, that,
Right, right.
the more European influence. So so it's interesting. So this piece for me is I want to take these collaborators that I know really well, that I work with all the time, and bring them a little bit more into the vernacular world, but keep my voice,
Mm-hmm.
keep the musical theater voice, but then bring them into it. And
Mm-hmm.
then it'll be a bunch of dancers like that. And then I wanted to get a couple of swing dance couples to join us in the piece, so that like they can keep really more strictly to the vernacular, but then bring them a little bit more into the musical theater side. So you get these two kind of like groups of people that actually do something pretty similarly, especially because my collaborators, they tend to be very like historically rooted. They have very like old training, in the sense of like jazz dance. Like they're very like into that like Jack Cole old school theater style. So I'm trying to take those two worlds that I love so much and bring them a little bit closer to each other, because they're not as different as I think they feel they are.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's going to be the next process for me, and I have some ideas that are pretty lofty for a dance musical,
Again.
which I won't say too much. I don't want to jinx it. But yeah, so I have some lofty ideas, and so the idea I have in my head would require the mixing of swing dancers and more theater dancers. So this is kind of be like, okay, would I be able to choreograph this? Does this look successful? And then where do we go from there?
So this is the piece you were describing, or your rehearsal for the piece that you were describing?
Yeah. Yeah, and if you look, and while you watch, you'll definitely notice like here's these like big legs, these very like old school jazz moments, but then you have all these vernacular moments. Oh, and then we're back to that slinky kind of Fosse thing, and now we're going into like more mathematicsy style stuff, and then back and forth and back and forth. So it's been nice to kind of let myself be creative and not bound to either style, but then just genuinely putting them together and seeing what happens.
Yeah, you can definitely see the rhythmic aspect in there, but then, you know, there's the dancing in the plie, there's the knees bent, there's leaning forward from the body. You know, there's the use of the pelvis, so that movement is being initiated from the pelvis. So there's all those aspects of what we would call, you know, the classical aspects of jazz dancing. But then you're working it in your own way and mixing with a little bit of today. So that's wonderful. And that's what we need to see. We need to see that too.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not to speak overconfidently, but I do think that even though my work is so traditionally rooted, I don't think it feels old, which is nice. I think that I'm never trying to recreate perfectly these vintage styles. I'm trying to make them make sense to our contemporary bodies, and while still being as like referential and honoring as I possibly can. But I think it still looks fresh because we're able to bring those kind of timeless elements. Like it's not, it's that energy, and it's the groundedness, and it's the it's sort of like the humanity of it. Because I feel like the good thing about ballet that we like so much is it's not really that human. I mean, people I'm sure would argue, but I think like real classical ballet is very like, we're not human, we're performing for the king and queen. Peasants are down below, versus like all of us, we're like, oh hey, yeah, like we're interacting, and we're very like, it's just very, we're present and we're aware of time and place, and we're not trying to we're trying to keep our humanity a little bit more. We're not worried about impressing people with the dance, we're worried about connecting with people through the dance, which I think a lot of dance nowadays is trying to be impressive versus we're trying to be connective.
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because if you know Billy Siggenfeld, who has Jump Rhythm Jazz Project, and going way back even into the 90s when I did a workshop and brought him in, and I mean that was his whole mantra, was don't impress the audience. We've been impressed so much. We need to have the connection, we need to have the feeling, we need to make the audience feel something, and the audience has to say, wow, I could almost do that. Not wow, that's so incredible, I could never do that. And that gap because of that is something that jazz dance can bridge the gap, because it is a movement of the people, you know, and that's something that's separated from there.
I 100% agree. And I've taken Billy's class when he was at Steps a couple of times, and it's always been so fantastic. And I think he said that when I was there too, and it definitely stuck with me. And also just like, I can't do some of those things. Like I've watched So You Can Dance. I can't do that. My bones would break in half. So, you know, a big mantra that I have for the company too is that if someone's playing a game and they've been playing it for a long time and they're better than you, why play their game when you can make your own game? So that's kind of a big thing for the company, where it's like, why try to beat people at a game that they play better than you? create
Right.
your own game and try to get other people to play.
There you go.
Yeah.
Are you like teaching in New York, or do you have auditions in New York? Like, how can people get in touch with you or work with you if they're interested in what you do?
Yeah. I mean, definitely just send me a like you can find the biggest thing we do is Instagram. We're trying to be very hip and with it with the kids. Instagram is the thing these days. So you can send us a message on Facebook. You can send us a message through our Instagram. You can find me directly. But we held an audition a while ago, and it didn't really turn that many people out. I don't know if that's how you say that right. Not that many people showed up.
Hmm.
Those that did, there's a lot of fantastic dancers, but they weren't really jazz inclined. The
Hmm.
thing that I find the most difficult is finding dancers that are jazz trained. A lot of people express interest in working with me. Uh, not to toot my own horn. No, but a lot of people express interest in working with me, and I'm like, okay, well, when's the last time you took a jazz class? And they're like,
Hmm.
I'm like, well, I'm
Yeah.
like, I know you're a beautiful dancer, but if you just do contemporary classes, you
Hmm.
can't really, I don't, I mean, I don't know. It's because
Hmm.
it's like, I've worked with dancers that are contemporary dancers and they do a great job. But then I started working with people that were jazz dancers and I was like, oh,
Hmm.
that's what it should look like. That's why it wasn't quite working, you know. So if for me it's super important that people are invested in jazz, and that can be musical theater. There's a lot of great musical theater dancers, but yeah, it's important to me that you like people take
Right.
class. You can't
Well,
just
maybe what
be
you
coming.
know you draw to people too is just from constantly performing, and as
Mhm.
people see it, someone who's really interested will then come forward and reach
Yeah,
out to you in some way. I mean, that's how Gwen Verdon met Jack Cole. She saw a
yeah,
performance and just met him afterwards and said, "I have to do this." And you know,
yeah,
that was the beginning of her whole thing. So, like, you want people like that, not somebody who's just wants to work in any way they
yeah,
can.
yeah.
You want
And,
somebody who
and
loves it.
that has been happening for us, which is great. I try. I mean, performance opportunities are pretty limited. Being
Hmm.
in concert jazz, which I know that you know that tune, but
Hmm.
it's nice. People, the more we do, and that's why I think the American Jazz Company for me is a long-term goal. It's just like things take time, and when you're doing concert jazz or you're doing jazz that's outside of musical theater or even inside musical theater, like it's an uphill battle. You're if you want to be successful, you really have to, you know, go against the stream a little bit. And so I think by not stressing about it happening now, better things will happen in the end. So if I'm not like, okay, I need 12 dancers for this piece now, I can be like, okay, how many dancers do I have? 3? Okay, let's make it a lofty goal, get one more for this piece, and then we'll do that, you know?
Hmm.
And so it's like, it's trying to not create things that are um, out of my reach in a sense,
Hmm.
but working with the resources that I have, just trying to create quality. A big thing that I believe in is like, having custom costumes. Like
Hmm. I
I,
know
I,
that. Yeah.
which it's nice, and this is no knock to other people, but I've seen a lot of pieces that are like, okay, what colors do we have in our closet? Which totally makes sense. Like budgets are like incredibly hard, but something that I try to do to stand out is that like our pieces so far have
Sure.
had custom costumes
Yeah.
where they're one of a kind and we look like super, I think we look more elevated because they're really thought out.
Mhm.
And I've been lucky to have people that are very generous with helping us out with that.
Mm.
But that's kind
Good.
of been, and that's a thing for me as well, where just focus on quality versus quantity. Focus on being eager and willing to grow and ready to grow and learning. Then over like how many pieces can we turn out? How do I
Mhm.
get a videographer to come in for this 1 minute and do a clip of this? You know, it's kind of like just do it at your own pace and it'll come.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. You know, with the costumes, because it's like last thing we need is another booty short ballet.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah. I don't want to see booty shorts anymore.
it makes the choreography just look too similar from person to person to person, because the
Exactly.
overall presentation is still coming from that same contemporary-ish
Yeah.
presentation. So the costumes are really important. But I think what you're doing is, I mean, you're going at it the right way, and you know, you have the drive to do it. And it's interesting that you're doing it like really on your own. You're not somebody who said, look, let me enroll in, you know, such and such college and take all of their choreography classes. Like, you know, a lot of the best people are very individual people. You know,
Yeah.
you get your own sense of who you are, and you develop that without somebody shaping you in what their particular idea may be. So that's a good thing too.
I was very lucky that too, when I was in Hartford, I was mentored by this woman named Darlene Zoller, and she took me under her wing. And so she was big, and she did a lot of teaching. She did a lot of choreography too. And so she was kind of the first person I was like, hey, do you want to choreograph this number? Hey, do you want to be my assistant for cabaret? Sure, let's do it. And she was very much like, she always like believed in me really intensely. And so I'm not going to say she taught me how to choreograph. She just kind of was like, you got this, just do it. And I was like, okay. You know, the first couple weren't that great, but you know, it's good. So then, and she got me a job substitute teaching at the Hart School, which is a cool thing to do because I love teaching dance too. But yeah, so I definitely feel like I learned how to choreograph because music tells you how to choreograph. If you just like, choreography is not as hard as people make it out to be, in my opinion, and maybe this is saying something about my choreography, but I think music tells you how to choreograph, and that would be a piece of advice I'd give to anyone who wants to start, is that if you find good music, it'll tell you how to do it.
I agree.
Just listen.
Yeah. All right. So if people want to reach you, they would look for American Jazz Company, and that would be on Instagram,
the American Jazz Company on Facebook, Instagram. You can find us.
Right, and they can get in contact with you that way. Okay. Well, you know, congratulations, Spencer. You know, you've got the drive. You're making something happen. So just keep at it. We're looking forward to maybe an interview a couple of years down the road where you'll have this magnificent big production.
We have a studio in Lincoln Center. We'll be ready to go. It'll be a face-to-face interview. It'll be great in Lincoln Center. It'll be big. Everyone will everyone will be cheering. It'll be great.
You got to think big too.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I'm excited. I'm very I'm excited for the future. We are planning, one thing that we do is we put on a vaudeville show. So me and one of my other collaborators do a vaudeville show. It's a great chance for choreographically for me to explore the more like vaudevillian side of things, allow me to kind of create, which I think is my strong point, more like a comedic dance. So that'll be coming up. People can look out for that. And then I feel like I had one more thing. No, that's all I can think of. But yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in for an interview. I appreciate that. And I wish you the best with what you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing. You got a great thing going there.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored. Thank you so much again. This has been such an honor.
Wonderful. All right. You hang in there. I'm going to take you out for a second, and then I'll get off of this and I'll talk to you in a second. Okay. Hold on.
Sounds good.
All right, so that was Spencer Pond, and his company is the American Jazz Company. He's based in New York City. He works a lot with vernacular styles of dance, but pushing it in a very contemporary way. And he's somebody who's an up-and-coming young person, and so I hope that you all check him out, check out his company, the American Jazz Company, either on Instagram and on Facebook. So that's it for our interview today. I'm Bob Boross, and this is my Jazz and Tap Dance Life. On this channel, we cover everything in jazz dance. We haven't gotten to the tap as much. It's coming, I promise. I keep saying it, but we're going to be doing more in tap in the future. And if you like it, please subscribe. Number one. Number two, hit the notifications bell. And number three, make sure you hit the like button, because when you say like, then YouTube is going to tell other people, oh, they like this, you should watch it too. So that's going to get us more visibility. So that's our broadcast time for tonight. So thanks so much, and we'll see you the next time.